Thoughts are things, my friend. They leave a scent, a residue, an echo in the ether. Most men walk through life blind, but I have opened the inner eye. I have come to capture the mental negative of a murderer. In the gaslit shadows of Edwardian London, crime usually meets its match in the logic of Scotland Yard. But when a mystery defies reason, when ghosts laugh in locked rooms or ancient Egyptian curses leave physical bruises, the world turns to Maurice Claw. Operating out of a cluttered curio shop in Wapping, Claw is a bizarre figure in a caped coat and a flat-topped brown bowler, constantly misting himself with verbena to cool the brain. Accompanied by his beautiful daughter, Isis, Claw utilizes his science of cycles, the belief that every event leaves an imperishable thought form behind. By sleeping at the scene of a crime on his odically sterilized red cushions, he photographs the past with his mind, unearthing secrets that even the dead intended to keep. When did the mysterious Maurice Claw first appear in London? I am asked this often. My answer is always, shortly before the strange happenings at the Menses Museum. Some people called Claw an insane theorist. I am here to tell you the facts. My name is Searles, and though I am just a historian, my friendship with the museum's curator, Martin Cororum, led me to the most incredible meeting of my life. It began 3 months after Cororum took the job. It was a Tuesday in August. I had just sat down for breakfast when Cororum walked in. He didn't wait for an invitation. He sank into an armchair, his face gaunt and his hands shaking as he lit a cigarette. "There's trouble at the museum," he said. His voice was cold. I stopped eating. Knowing his responsibility, I feared the worst. Was something stolen? "No," he replied. "Worse." "What do you mean, Cororum?" He threw his unsmoked cigarette into the hearth. "You know Conway? The night attendant? Well, he's dead." I stood up, my breakfast forgotten. "An accident?" "No, Searles. Murdered. His neck was broken." The impossible crime scene. We rushed to the museum. The tragedy had happened in the Greek Room, which holds the finest treasures in London. When we arrived, the police were already there, standing over the body. Conway was lying face down. His limbs were twisted under a chair, his fists clenched tight. His head was doubled under his chest, a horrific sight that left no doubt. His neck had been snapped. The doctor examined him and looked up, puzzled. He made a hard fight of it. He must have been exhausted when he died. Cororum snapped back. "A fight? That's impossible. No one else was in these rooms last night." The clues. The police inspector led us into the next room. "Then how do you explain this, sir?" The glass front of a wall case had been smashed to pieces. Shards of glass covered the floor. Then, a cry came from the other side of the room. A guard had found something else. The display for the Athenian harp, a priceless treasure of ancient gold and jewels, was unlocked. The detective turned to Cororum. "How could a thief get in?" "They couldn't," Cororum insisted. "At 6 o'clock, we search every room. Every door is locked. The windows have iron bars. The only other door leads to my private apartment, and I keep it bolted from the inside." The detective mopped his forehead. "So, the doors were locked from the inside. The windows are barred. The keys were found lying on the floor next to the body. How did the killer leave?" "He didn't," Cororum whispered. "There is nowhere to hide. Not even a mouse could hide in here." The room went silent. We were looking at a murder that was physically impossible. Just then, a knock came from the heavy iron door. It was Hilda, Corum's daughter. The mystery had begun, and we were going to need the help of a very unusual man. The heavy door opened, and Hilda Cororum walked in. She looked pale and worried. She told everyone that a strange old man had come to meet her father. The man was sent by a journalist named Douglas Glade, and his name was Maurice Claw. At first, people were unsure about him. A Scotland Yard officer said Claw was an odd person, an antique dealer who liked to act like a detective. He was smart, but also very strange. Soon, Maurice Claw entered the room. He looked unusual, tall but bent, with pale skin, strange clothes, and a mysterious presence. His voice was deep and unsettling. He greeted everyone politely, then did something very odd. He sprayed perfume on his head and said, "There is a smell of death here." People found him strange, even a little funny at first. But that quickly changed. Claw began talking about his past experiences with crime from different parts of the world. He spoke in a serious and intense way, which made everyone start taking him seriously. He asked for permission to investigate the murder, and Cororum agreed. Claw carefully examined the dead body of Conway. He noticed small details, his hair, hands, and even the dust on the floor. He also searched the entire room, paying special attention to a Greek harp kept in a glass case. He believed that this harp was somehow connected to the mystery. Then Claw shared a very unusual idea. He said that when a person dies, their final thoughts don't just disappear. They leave an impression in the surrounding air, like a photograph. And he claimed that he had trained his mind to read these impressions. To do this, he asked for a strange favor. He wanted to spend the night in the room, exactly where Conway had died, so he could recreate the victim's last thoughts. The police officer laughed at this idea, but Claw responded with a chilling story about sensing the last fear of a man who died in the desert. His words were so powerful that everyone became silent and uneasy. Finally, Cororum agreed to let Claw stay the night, but Claw had one condition: no police inside the room. He didn't want any distractions while he tried to uncover the truth. With that, Morris Claw left the room, leaving everyone with a mix of curiosity, fear, and hope. The mystery had just taken a very strange turn. One evening, Morris Claw returned to the museum, bringing with him his beautiful daughter, Isis. Inspector Grimby from Scotland Yard was surprised to see her. Claw explained that Isis helps him develop his special photographic work. They all went upstairs to the Greek room, where the mysterious murder had happened. The room was dark, lit by just one lamp. Mr. Cororum confirmed that the jewels on the Athenian harp were real. Nothing had been replaced or stolen. Morris Claw decided to stay in the room overnight. Isis placed a strange red cushion exactly where the victim had died. Claw explained that the cushion was clean and would help him sense the final thoughts of the dead man. Everyone left him alone. Outside, Inspector Grimby assured Cororum that Claw could be trusted. But Isis overheard them and sharply defended her father, clearly confident in his abilities. Later that night, Cororum and the narrator discussed the mystery, but nothing made sense. The room had been locked. There was no way in, and no way out. The next morning, Claw revealed something shocking. Using his strange method, he had seen a vision from the victim's mind. White right pointing backhand index, a woman dressed entirely in white. White right pointing backhand index, she was holding the Athenian harp. White right pointing backhand index, the victim felt both fear and fascination toward her. Claw also mentioned a mysterious van seen near the museum around the time of the murder. Before leaving, he gave one final instruction. White right pointing backhand index, spread plaster powder around the harp each night, to catch footprints. The mystery had just become even stranger. For a few weeks after the strange incident, everything at the museum seemed normal. A new night watchman, John Mallister, a strong and confident man, took charge. He wasn't afraid and believed he could handle anything. But one morning, something terrible happened. Mallister was found dead inside the Greek room. The room looked like there had been a violent struggle. Furniture was broken, a statue had fallen, and the Athenian harp was out of its case. Yet nothing was stolen. Doctors said he died of heart failure, but only after extreme physical stress. Just like before. The room was locked from inside. Keys were found on the floor. No one knew how the attacker entered or escaped. But the most shocking clue was this. White right pointing backhand index, small barefoot footprints were found in the plaster around the harp. They looked like a woman's footprints. Morris Claw was missing, but he had sent a strange message. White right pointing backhand index, keep the harp's key under your pillow at night. Soon, the team decided to guard the museum themselves at night. For several nights, nothing happened. Then one stormy night, everything changed. Thunder roared, lightning flashed, and suddenly, a strange, soft, haunting sound filled the air. Then came a terrifying scream. The narrator rushed into the Greek room. In a flash of lightning, he saw White right pointing backhand index Inspector Grimby lying dead on the floor. White right pointing backhand index the harp again out of its case. White right pointing backhand index and a mysterious woman in white moving across the room. Before he could react, she disappeared into darkness. Moments later, Cororum and another guard arrived. They were terrified. Grimby was dead. Suddenly, someone knocked loudly at the main door. When they opened it, White right pointing backhand index Morris Claw was standing outside. But it was too late. When they returned to the Greek room with Morris Claw, something unexpected happened. Inspector Grimby, who everyone thought was dead, was actually alive. Claw had arrived just in time. Grimby, still shaken, whispered that he had seen a terrifying white figure playing the harp during the lightning storm. As Mr. Cororum tried to pick up the Athenian harp, Claw suddenly stopped him. White right pointing backhand index, don't touch it. It means death. Then Claw revealed the truth. The harp was a deadly trap. At the top of the harp, there was a hidden needle, so small it was almost invisible. Anyone who touched it after the harp was played would be poisoned. The victims had unknowingly touched that exact spot. To prove it, Claw carefully held the harp from the side and played its strings. A strange, haunting sound filled the room. Then he explained the shocking history. White right pointing backhand index, the harp was created for the infamous Cesare Borgia. White right pointing backhand index, it was once used as a secret weapon. White right pointing backhand index, anyone who touched it wrongly after it was played would die. But one mystery still remained. White right pointing backhand index, who was playing the harp at night? Suddenly, a soft sound came from nearby. They discovered that Mr. Corum's daughter, Hilda, had been sleepwalking. She would unknowingly enter the room, play the harp, and return to bed, without remembering anything. The guards, hearing the music, would rush in and try to stop it. White right pointing backhand index and die from the poisoned needle. That night, she had been frightened awake by Grimby's scream. Everything finally made sense. Claw gently placed the harp back and calmly said, White right pointing backhand index, this instrument carries the scent of death. The mystery was finally solved. Morris Claw was a very unusual man. Many of his cases involved strange objects, ancient relics and rare artifacts. People who knew him could never agree on who he really was. He often changed his appearance, and his true identity remained a mystery. No one even knew if the man running a small curio shop was the real Morris Claw. To understand him better, the narrator introduces a new story, told by an engineer named Mr. Clifford. The story begins with Clifford and his friend staying in a quiet suburb, where they often visited a man named Hail Zoen, a collector of rare items from Egypt. One evening, Hail Zoen showed them his collection. Among many objects, one stood out. White right pointing backhand index, a broken piece of pottery with strange symbols and the figure of an ancient Egyptian god. Hail Zoen explained that the writing on it was unknown and possibly secret. He also revealed something shocking. White right pointing backhand index, he had secretly taken the artifact using a thief. Another mysterious man had offered him a large amount of money for it, but Hail Zoen refused. That same night, something strange happened. While studying the artifact alone, Hail Zoen suddenly felt like someone was watching him. When he turned, no one was there. But just as he was leaving the room, he saw something impossible. White right pointing backhand index, a pale hand and arm near the table, and then it disappeared. There was no one else in the flat. The mystery had begun. After the strange incident, Hail Zoen was clearly disturbed. He told his friends that a new neighbor had moved into the flat next door. That same evening, they went to his room to investigate. Everything looked normal, but the strange feeling remained. Suddenly, someone knocked at the door. It was Dr. Zeta, the same mysterious man who had earlier tried to buy the Egyptian potsherd. He claimed that he had just moved into the neighboring flat and came to greet them. Though polite and charming, something about him made Hail Zoen uneasy. Zeta invited them to lunch the next day, and surprisingly, they agreed. The next day, They visited him and found his home neat and well organized. Slowly, their suspicion began to fade. But then, a shocking event happened. One morning, Hail Zoen called them urgently. White right pointing backhand index, someone had broken into his room. Cabinets were open, everything was disturbed, but nothing was stolen. Moments later, Dr. Zeta rushed in with news. White right pointing backhand index, his own flat had also been broken into. Then he revealed something unexpected. White right pointing backhand index, he also had a matching piece of the same ancient pot. When he showed it, both pieces fit together perfectly. Now it was clear. White right pointing backhand index, the mysterious artifact, was more important than they had imagined. And Dr. Zeta knew much more than he was revealing. Hail Zoen was still nervous after the strange incident. He told his friends that a new neighbor had moved into the next flat. They went into the room where everything had happened. It was getting dark, so Hail Zoen turned on the light and showed where he had been sitting that night. Lesty asked questions about the window and the position of the lamp, trying to understand what really happened. Suddenly, someone knocked at the door. It was Dr. Zeta, a strange foreign man. He said he had just moved next door and wanted to meet Hail Zoen again after knowing him in Egypt. Dr. Zeta looked unusual. White hair, dark eyebrows, pale face, and very formal manners. He invited them to lunch the next day. Though Hail Zoen seemed uncomfortable, they all accepted. The next day, they visited him. His house was neat and organized. Over time, he became friendly with them, but something still felt suspicious. Then one morning, Hail Zoen called them urgently. Someone had tried to break into his room, but nothing was stolen. The important artifact, a broken vase piece, was safe. Suddenly, Dr. Zeta rushed in and said his own house had also been attacked. Then he revealed a shocking truth. White right pointing backhand index, he also had another piece of the same ancient vase. White right pointing backhand index, when both pieces were compared, they matched perfectly. He told them a strange story about an ancient Egyptian ritual and a sacred vase connected to a lost spiritual power. He believed that if all pieces were joined, they could bring back a spirit. They were shocked but curious. So they agreed to try a seance, a spirit-calling experiment. During the first attempt, nothing happened. During the second attempt, the table moved slightly, but nothing serious. Dr. Zeta insisted they were close to success and planned one final attempt with some changes. The next day, Dr. Zeta invited them for lunch and even took them to a concert. He seemed charming, intelligent, and full of interesting stories. That night, they gathered again at Hail Zoen's flat for the final seance. Zeta insisted on keeping the room dim. An oil lamp was used, and a screen blocked outside light. Everything was arranged carefully. As they sat in silence, strange things began to happen. White right pointing backhand index, the table started shaking more strongly than before. White right pointing backhand index, then a soft, eerie voice was heard, like a distant chant. Zeta whispered that it was the hymn of the souls. Then, something even stranger appeared. White right pointing backhand index, a white figure of a woman near the vase. Before they could react, white right pointing backhand index, the table suddenly overturned. White right pointing backhand index, the lamp went out. White right pointing backhand index, the room fell into complete darkness. In the chaos, someone escaped. When they finally broke out and rushed into Zeta's flat, white right pointing backhand index, it was completely empty. Everything had been removed. Then the truth became clear. White right pointing backhand index, Zeta had planned everything. White right pointing backhand index, the seances were just a distraction. White right pointing backhand index, his partner had secretly entered, taken the artifact, and escaped. He had even taken their matches and disabled the lights to make his escape easier. A car had been waiting outside. Zeta and his partner were gone. In the end, they were left with nothing but confusion. And one final question remained. White right pointing backhand index, why was the artifact so important? The narrator once visited Maurice Claw's curio shop with Hail Zoen. The shop was dark, filled with strange and ancient objects. A loud parrot kept repeating a strange phrase, adding to the mysterious atmosphere. Soon, Morris Claw appeared, an unusual-looking man with a strange personality. Then he called for his daughter, Isis. White right pointing backhand index, a beautiful young woman entered the room. The moment Hail Zoen saw her, he was shocked. Because he recognized her. Claw calmly revealed the truth. White right pointing backhand index Isis was the same woman involved in the earlier incidents. White right pointing backhand index, she had secretly entered Hail Zoen's room before. White right pointing backhand index, she had even hidden inside the room without being seen. Then came the biggest revelation. White right pointing backhand index Dr. Zeta was actually Morris Claw in disguise. Everything had been planned by him. The seances were fake, the strange events were tricks. Isis helped him carry out the plan. Claw explained that he was actually working to recover the potsherd for its rightful owner. Hail Zoen couldn't take legal action because he had obtained the artifact in an illegal way himself. In the end, Claw had successfully taken back the artifact. And the reason? White right pointing backhand index, the potsherd was extremely valuable. White right pointing backhand index, it later helped create an important discovery about ancient Egyptian texts. White right pointing backhand index, it was sold for a huge amount of money. The mystery was solved, not by ghosts or magic, but by clever planning and disguise. People often said that Morris Claw had failures, but according to the narrator, he never truly failed. Now a new case begins. White right pointing backhand index, the Cresping murder case. Inspector Grimby, who had earlier worked with Claw, arrived early one morning to discuss the case. At first, the police thought the criminal was a former butler named Ryder. But after investigating, Grimby was no longer sure. The case had become confusing. So Grimby decided to do something unusual. White right pointing backhand index, he wanted help from Morris Claw. Even though he once doubted Claw, now he trusted his abilities after seeing his past success. Grimby visited the narrator and convinced him to help contact Claw. Together, they traveled to Wapping, to Claw's strange curio shop. The shop was dark, messy, and filled with old objects and strange items. It had an eerie but fascinating atmosphere. A loud parrot greeted them with a strange phrase, just like before. Then Morris Claw appeared. Before they could even explain the case, White right pointing backhand index Claw already knew why they had come. He had just returned from Paris and was already aware of the Cresping murder. The mystery was about to begin. In the city of Athens, love is a legal battlefield. Hermia is told she must marry a man she doesn't love, or face a life of isolation. Refusing to give up, she and her boyfriend, Lysander, decide to make a run for it. They plan to meet in the deep woods at midnight to escape the law forever. But there's a leak. Hermia's friend Helena tells the jilted groom, and suddenly, everyone is heading into the dark forest for a night they'll never forget. What the humans don't know is that these woods are haunted by fairy royalty. King Oberon and Queen Titania are having a massive falling out, and the forest is feeling the heat. To get revenge, Oberon sends his chaotic sidekick, Puck, to find a magical purple flower. One drop of its juice in your eyes makes you fall in love with the very first thing you see. Oberon's plan? Use it on his queen to make her fall for something ridiculous while he steals her prized possessions. As the sun starts to peek through the trees, Oberon finally decides the joke has gone far enough. He reverses the spells, fixes the couples, and makes the queen forget her donkey boyfriend. The humans wake up on the forest floor, rubbing their eyes and wondering if the whole night was just a wild, shared hallucination. They return to the city for a massive wedding, while Puck reminds the audience, if you didn't like the show, just pretend it was all a dream. Detectives stand in the haunting silence of Crespi Hall, an ancient estate where the air feels heavy with secrets. The eccentric Morris Claw stares at a bloodstain on the floor with a strange, fanatical joy. His daughter, Isis, calls it an etheric storm, the idea that a violent death leaves a permanent psychic imprint on a room. While the local police look on in confusion, Claw explains his chilling theory. Thoughts are physical things, and the atmosphere here is still screaming with the victim's final moments. The murder weapon is a massive, ancient battle axe, so heavy the local police can barely lift it. They assume the killer must have been a giant, or at least a young man in his prime. But Morris Claw, An old man who looks more like a librarian than a warrior grabs the heavy steel. To everyone's shock, he swings the axe around his head with the grace of a professional swordsman. He proves a terrifying point. Strength isn't about size, it's about the will to strike. A close-up of a bulky, weathered leather notebook filled with sketches of ancient weapons and handwritten notes. An old hand points to a drawing of the battle axe. Superimposed in the background is a ghostly image of a knight in armor. Intricate detail, vintage aesthetic, sepia tones. The local investigator is stunned. He had let the butler walk free, hoping to use him as a trap, but Claw exposes the flaw in his logic. "You have done two silly things," Claw rumbles. "You wasted time on the obvious, and you trusted a doctor." With a burst of energy, Claw prepares to leave. He doesn't need to sleep on the crime scene this time. He already knows who the killer is. The hunt is on, and Claw promises the assassin will be on the 3:45 train back to London in handcuffs. As the investigators drive through the village, they spot the suspect, the old butler, Ryder, leaning over a garden gate with a face full of sorrow. The police are ready to make a move, but Claw stops them. He approaches the old man and asks a single, cryptic question: "How is he today?" The effect is electric. Ryder pales, gasping as if Claw has read his very soul. Claw leaves his daughter, Isis, behind to watch the old man, while the rest of the team races toward a mysterious medical clinic. They arrive at the office of Dr. Madden, a man who clearly knows he's in trouble. Claw doesn't play games. He accuses the doctor of hiding a patient and warns him that he is bordering on a criminal cover-up. The doctor, sweating under Claw's intense gaze, finally snaps. He confesses that his patient hasn't been hiding, he's been suffering. The mystery man was thrown from a horse on the night of the murder and has been trapped in a state of total amnesia ever since. The doctor explains the strange timeline. On the night of the Jewish financier's death, a local artist named Rogers was found unconscious on the Uxley Road. He had suffered a massive concussion and didn't remember a single thing, not even his own name. It took a high-stakes surgery from a London specialist to bring his mind back. Just last night, the fog finally cleared. The man's memory has returned, and with it, the truth of what happened in the banqueting hall. They reach Hinksman's farm, where a bronzed young man with a bandaged head sits peacefully in the shade. He looks like a simple traveler, but Morris Claw sees through the disguise. Stepping onto the veranda, Claw ignores the Mr. Rogers alias and addresses the man by his true, noble title, Sir Roland Crespi. The secret heir to the blood-stained estate has been found, and the final piece of the science of cycles is about to lock into place. Sir Roland reveals the truth. He wasn't just a traveler. He was the rightful heir, watching from the shadows. Through a secret passage hidden behind an old painting, he overheard the villainous Heidelberger insulting his mother's memory. Driven by rage, Roland burst through the hidden door to confront the man who had stolen his home. A brutal struggle began in the dark, under the flickering light of a single candle, as Heidelberger drew a knife to slash the family's most prized portrait. What happened next seemed like a divine judgment. As Heidelberger lunged with his knife, he missed his mark and slammed into a massive oak post with tremendous force. The impact shook the very foundation of the gallery above. The ancient battle-axe of Black Geoffrey, held by rusted, centuries-old farsons, was jolted loose. It fell like a guillotine, striking the villain down in a freak accident that looked like a calculated execution. The science of cycles had completed its loop. The police are skeptical. Couldn't Roland have pulled the axe down himself? But Morris Claw has the final word. He proves that the spot where the axe hung was physically impossible for any human to reach. You'd have to be a giraffe to touch it from the floor, and the gallery rail was too far away. The axe fell because the house itself seemed to reject the intruder. The mystery is solved not by fingerprints, but by the weight of history and the physics of a haunted home. As the train whistles, heading back to London, the case is closed. Sir Roland is cleared, the butler is exonerated, and the Crespi legacy is saved. Claw doesn't care about the fame. He walks away with his true prize, the cursed battle-axe itself. As Isis Claw blows rings of cigarette smoke into the air, The eccentric detective smiles. The cycle has ended, the spirits are quieted, and the science of cycles has proven, once again, that the past is never truly dead.
Maurice Claw is no ordinary detective. From his dusty curio shop in Wapping, he ignores common crimes to hunt for etheric storms and the hidden history of relics. His latest interest? A scandalous masterpiece by the sculptor Roger Paxton. It's a statue of Nycris, an ancient Egyptian dancer, crafted from ivory and gold. But this isn't just art. It's adorned with a cursed, gem-encrusted girdle taken directly from a pharaoh's tomb. The statue is so lifelike, critics call it a modern Phidias, but the locals call it terrifying. The sculptor Roger Paxton has created a masterpiece, a chryselephantine statue of the dancer Nycris. Carved from smooth ivory and draped in real gold, she reclines on an ebony throne. But the centerpiece is a jeweled girdle taken from a pharaoh's tomb. It's worth a fortune, and its history is dark. Even Paxton's model fled the studio, swearing that the ivory figure moved as if a heart were beating beneath the gold. To protect this treasure, Paxton sleeps in his studio every night on a simple camp bed. His friends visit for a final viewing, noting how the statue looks almost human in the pale moonlight. The doors are double-locked, the windows are barred, and Paxton remains on guard beside his creation. As the last guests leave, the studio settles into a deep, eerie silence, with the statue of Nycris glowing softly in the dark. By the time the sun rises, the impossible has happened. The studio is still locked, the sculptor is still inside, but the throne is empty. The jewels, the gold, and the ivory have vanished without a sound. It is a puzzle that defies logic, a locked-room mystery that can only be explained by someone who understands the psychic vibrations of the past. The case of the disappearing dancer is officially open. Roger Paxton is a man of logic, but logic has failed him. He tells a chilling story. In the dead of night, he was awakened by a high-pitched voice calling a single name, Nycris. He unlocked the studio door and stepped into the garden for exactly 30 seconds. He was never out of earshot, and a constable stood at the street corner. Yet, in those few heartbeats, the heavy ivory statue vanished. It didn't just leave, it evaporated, leaving an empty ebony throne behind. Just as hope fades, a car rumbles to a stop. Out steps Maurice Claw, the man who hunts etheric storms. Wearing his tattered caped coat and flat-topped bowler, he looks more like a ghost than a detective. Beside him is his daughter, Isis, carrying a large red cushion. Claw doesn't ask about fingerprints or footprints. He asks about the sense of touch. To him, the air is a sensitive plate that has recorded the thief's every thought. Before settling in, Claw performs a bizarre ritual. He climbs a ladder and crawls across the glass roof of the studio like a giant spider. Peering down into the empty space where the statue once Saturday, I find what I look for, he rumbles, and no man is entitled to find more. He is searching for the critical moment, the exact second the thief's mind was most focused on the crime, leaving a psychic residue behind. The investigation takes its strangest turn. Claw orders his red cushion to be placed on the vacant ebony throne, the very place where the ivory dancer reclined. He lies down, wraps his cloak around him, and instantly falls into a deep, trance-like sleep. Isis whispers for everyone to withdraw. Maurice Claw is now developing the negative in his mind, waiting for the shadows of the studio to reveal the face of the thief. Morning breaks, and Maurice Claw wakes with a start. He doesn't look for fingerprints. He looks for mental photographs. He claims the air in the studio tells a bizarre story. The statue of Nycris didn't just vanish, she walked. He describes her moving on tiptoe, silent and cautious. Most strangely, Claw declares the thief is a man of imposing height, at least 6'3". While the artist Paxton is lost in despair, Claw is already tracing a path toward the neighborhood doctor's house. Claw and his team track down Constable Freeman, the officer who worked the midnight shift. He recounts a strange event. Around 12 o'clock, a giant of a man appeared at Dr. Gleason's gate, supporting a woman wrapped in a massive fur cloak. She seemed terribly ill, her face completely hidden. The man was so tall he towered over the officer. But here is the puzzle. At that very moment, the statue was still safe on its throne. How could this midnight patient be connected to a crime that hadn't happened yet? The constable recalls one final detail. As the big man lifted the sick woman into a cab, a single silk-stockinged foot peeked out from the fur. She had dropped her shoe in the shadows. The giant whispered words of encouragement to her and ordered the driver to the Savoy Hotel. Claw's eyes gleam behind his glasses. There is much genius wasted, he rumbles. He isn't interested in the hotel. He's interested in the cab driver's secret logs. Claw tracks the cab driver to his home and uncovers a lie. The tall man didn't go to the Savoy. He changed the address mid-trip, heading instead to a quiet house in Clapham. The driver remembers the man carrying the sick woman into the building, still talking to her as if she could hear him. Claw is triumphant. He has found the giant, and he has found the destination. What a great science is the science of the mind, he cries, as they race toward the final confrontation. The trail leads to a small, quiet house in Clapham, set back from the road and shrouded in morning mist. Maurice Claw knocks repeatedly on the door until it is thrown open by a towering figure, a man standing over 6'3" with sharp, intellectual features. Before the stranger can speak, Claw delivers a cryptic greeting. Has Nina caught cold? The giant's face transforms from defiance to shock. He realizes the eccentric old man before him knows exactly who he is. The man is Jean Colette, a mastermind who realizes the game is up. He leads Claw and his companions into a long, bare room at the back of the house, a space that is half workshop, half laboratory. You are very clever, Colette admits with a wry smile. Had you come 4 hours later, I would have been gone. He steps toward a tall screen in the corner, and with a sudden movement, hurls it to the ground to reveal his secret. There, reclining in a chair, is the missing statue of Nycris. The ivory and gold shine in the workshop light, but the ancient girdle and one of the anklets have already been carefully removed. Colette explains his daring plan. He couldn't risk damaging the masterpiece by removing the jewels in Paxton's studio, so he staged a psychic heist to take the whole figure. He reveals that the sick woman the constable saw wasn't a woman at all. It was the statue itself, wrapped in fur. The room is filled with the sound of a woman coughing from behind a closed door. Colette explains that his partner, Nina, Paxton's former model, is truly ill, and his worry for her was the only thing that slowed him down. Claw reveals he knew them both from their days in the art world of Paris. There will be no police today. Claw only wants the treasure returned. As they prepare to take the dancer home, the mystery of how a statue walked out of a locked room is finally laid to rest. Back in the studio, Maurice Claw reveals the staggering truth. The group was tricked by a living statue. While Paxton and his friends were dining in the house, Jean Colette, a strongman and failed artist, climbed the garden wall. He didn't just steal the statue, he replaced it. Nina, the model, sat on the ebony throne, painted and draped to look exactly like the ivory dancer. When the friends viewed the statue at 1 o'clock, they weren't looking at art. They were looking at a breathing woman. Colette was a genius of timing. He wrapped the heavy ivory statue in Nina's furs and carried it out through the neighbor's drive, even tricking a policeman into hailing a cab for the sick woman. To give themselves a head start, he left Nina on the throne to act as a decoy. Claw explains the psychic fear he felt in his dream. It was Nina's terror of being touched, which would have instantly revealed her warm flesh beneath the white paint. The final act was a feat of strength. To get Nina out of the studio without using the gravel path, which would have left footprints, Colette climbed onto the studio roof. He called out Nycris in a high voice to lure Paxton into the garden. As Paxton peered over the wall, Nina reached up, and Colette hauled her bodily onto the roof. They escaped across the tiles and into the night, leaving Paxton to return to an empty throne and an impossible mystery. Just as Claw finishes his explanation, the giant himself, Jean Colette, walks into the studio. In a display of pure Parisian bravado, he returns 2 small wedges he forgot to pack, bows elegantly, and walks out, a free man. Claw simply smiles and bedews his forehead with verbena. The ivory dancer is safe, the science of cycles is satisfied, and the most daring heist in London history ends not with a prison cell, but with a bow.
Inspector Grimby of Scotland Yard is a man in a corner. A committee of commercial giants has gathered a fortune to purchase a legendary Indian diamond, the Blue Raja, as a gift for the crown. But a shadow has fallen over the ceremony. The Lord Mayor has received a cryptic letter signed by the eccentric Maurice Claw. It contains a single, chilling instruction. Beware that the Blue Raja is not stolen on Wednesday the 13th. Do not lose sight of it for one moment. The Lord Mayor initially laughed at the warning, but Grimby knows better. He understands Claw's science of cycles, the belief that history repeats itself and certain relics are destined to be stolen on specific dates. Grimby has already tried to visit Claw's curios shop in Wapping, only to be met by the detective's daughter, Isis, who treats the inspector like a comedian. With the deadline approaching, the yard is bracing for a heist they can't even explain. The security plan is ironclad. Tomorrow morning, a trio of experts representing the India Office, the City of London, and the Gaikwar of Nizam will descend into the safe deposit vaults to retrieve the stone. Grimby and 2 armed officers will guard them every step of the way. No one enters, no one leaves, and the diamond will never be out of sight. It seems impossible for a thief to strike, but Maurice Claw has never been wrong about a date with destiny. Grimby is confident, yet restless. Like a cat watches a mouse, he says, that is how we will guard the Blue Raja. He suspects Claw's letter was a courtesy, a hint from a man who sees the psychic storms before they arrive. As London sleeps, the most valuable diamond in the world sits in its velvet-lined box, unaware that the cycle of crime is about to turn. If someone steals the Raja tomorrow, they won't just be a thief, they'll be a phantom. The scene is Basinghall House, a fortress of commerce in Moorgate Street. 8 of the most powerful men in London gather in a private inner office. The security is absolute. The only functional door is locked from the inside, and Inspector Grimby stands guard in the outer room. There are no secret passages, no hidden exits, only a group of gentlemen and the most valuable diamond in the world resting on a simple oaken table. Mr. Anderson raises the Blue Raja. It is a masterpiece of nature, 132 carats of rare, blue-tinted perfection. As he holds it up, the morning sunlight pouring through the window strikes the stone, sending spears of blue flame dancing across the red carpet. The gem passes from hand to hand, a symbol of history and wealth. The documents are signed, the checks are exchanged, and for one brief moment, the diamond is the most watched object in England. The tension snaps when a blood-curdling scream erupts from the courtyard below. A voice cries out for mercy, echoing through the stone archway. Startled, all 8 men rush to the window, craning their necks to see the commotion. For a few frantic seconds, their backs are turned to the table. They find the window catches jammed, keeping them trapped inside as they watch a constable run toward the source of the cries. The screams vanish as quickly as they began. The men turn back to the table, ready to secure the jewel and leave. But the room falls into a deathly silence. The leather case is still there, sitting exactly where Sir John Caron had placed it. But the Blue Raja, the 132-carat stone that was there only moments ago, has disappeared. In a room with locked doors and no exits, the impossible has happened. The diamond has vanished into thin air. Panic erupts in the locked room. Lord Mayor Sir Michael Cayley and the committee realize the impossible. The Blue Raja has vanished. To clear their names, every man, including the wealthiest bankers in London, removes his coat and empties his pockets. They search each other with desperate efficiency, turning out linings and even checking their shoes. But as the last pocket is turned, the truth settles in like a fog. The diamond is not on their persons, and it is not on the floor. Inspector Grimby enters, eyes widening at the news. He performs a search so thorough it includes tapping the men's teeth with a pencil, drawing on his experience with diamond mines in South Africa. He surveys the room, 4 bare walls, a locked door, and a jammed window. The Blue Raja is not in this room, he declares. It's a conjuring trick played on the city's elite, leaving the inspector staring at a locked box with the lid still on. 2 cabs pull up to Basinghall House. Out steps the dazzling Isis Claw, wrapped in snowy ermine furs, followed by her father, the eccentric Maurice Claw. Clad in his caped coat and his signature brown bowler, Claw immediately begins grumbling about the drain holes affecting the cab's meter. He ignores the gravity of the crime to focus on the cycle of crime, sniffing the air of the courtyard where the mysterious screams were heard only an hour before. Inside the office, Claw stuns the committee with his knowledge. He reveals that the Blue Raja was discovered on this exact day, April 13th, nearly 250 years ago. History repeats in cycles, he rumbles. Man's will cannot check it. He orders hot black coffee to stimulate his inner perception and prepares to enter the locked room. To Claw, the theft wasn't a crime of opportunity, but a date with destiny that has left a psychic trail only he can follow. While the experts and aristocrats waited in the hallway, Maurice Claw sat in total silence in the locked box of an office. He practiced the difficult art of thinking of nothing, turning his mind into a sensitive plate. He waded through the etheric waves of panic and loss left behind by the committee, searching for the one sharp, cold vibration of the thief. When he emerged, he didn't have a name, but he had a psychic photograph of the thief's inner distractions. Plus, Claw's accusation that someone in the room had snorted in derision sets everyone on edge. He looks at Sir John Caron, the polished baronet, Mr. Ching, the stoic Hindu representative, and the Andersons, the respected Scottish jewellers. One of them is a liar, Claw claims. The atmosphere in the outer office shifts from professional concern to sharp, jagged suspicion. Even the beautiful Isis Claw stands like a sentry, her eyes scanning the men for a crack in their composure. The 12 peanuts clue seems like a joke, but to Claw, it is the key. He describes the thief's thought of a fair young lady, a detail that makes several men in the room shift uncomfortably. Grimsby is at a loss. His Kaffir-style search found no parrots and no peanuts. Claw, however, is undeterred. He begins to spray his verbena mist again, searching for the physical link between a locked room and a bird's cage. Claw turns his focus to the human element. Which of you, he rumbles, knows a lady with hair like spun gold and a parrot that likes to be fed? The question is ridiculous, yet the weight of Claw's reputation makes the men hesitate. The investigation has moved from the steel vaults of Moorgate Street to the secret lives of the men who were trusted to guard the Crown's treasure. The cycle of crime is turning, and it is pointing directly at someone's private heart. Maurice Claw leads the skeptical committee to the Hotel Astoria, claiming he must verify the Gaikwar signature. But Claw's true aim is far more physical. As they arrive, he fakes a stumble, leaning heavily on Gautami Ching to ensure the Hindu representative cannot bolt. The investigation has shifted from the cycle of crime to a race for the room. Claw knows that if Ching reaches his apartments first, the evidence of the crime will vanish forever. They burst into Ching's suite to find a shocking sight. A large, empty parrot cage sitting on a table and a pale, golden-haired woman standing in the shadows. This is the fair young lady from Claw's mental negative. Realizing the game is up, Ching lunges for an inner room. The 12 peanuts clue finally makes sense. The cage wasn't for a bird. It was a target used for weeks of secret practice. 147. Claw explains the impossible theft. While the committee was distracted by the screams in the courtyard, Ching didn't look out the window. Instead, like a master conjurer, he snatched the Blue Raja and slipped it into a rubber purse. With the precision of an athlete, he tossed the diamond through the small square ventilator above the door. On the other side, in the public corridor, his accomplice was waiting like a wicket-keeper to catch the falling fortune in her handbag. The mystery ends in tragedy. Before Grimsby can make an arrest, a single pistol shot rings out. Gautami Ching, caught in his own web of fascination and greed, takes his own life. The Blue Raja is found in the girl's handbag, wrapped in rubber to dampen the sound of the catch. As Claw bedews his forehead with verbena one last time, he reminds the group that while the diamond is recovered, the human cycle of obsession remains the greatest mystery of all. In the quiet of Mr. Searle's office, Maurice Claw prepares for a visit. He sheds his caped overcoat, which Searles describes as sartorial wreckage, and extracts his signature scent spray to bedew his brow with verbena. The news of Shaun Hofman's arrival changes everything. The big American, with his arm in a sling from a shootout on the Mexican border, has rented a house called The Grove. He invites Claw and Searles to dinner, unaware that he has just invited the world's leading expert on haunted houses into a trap set by history. As Claw and Searles arrive at The Grove, they are struck by the magnificent avenue of towering poplars leading to the house. While the Hofman girls, Lillian and Greta, provide a warm welcome, Claw is visibly preoccupied. He recognizes the trees. To the girls, they are beautiful. To Claw, they are the soft and ceaseless voices that have presided over a century of tragedy. He notes Greta's sensitive, mediumistic nature with growing concern, fearing she is a perfect conductor for the house's dark energy. Safe in Searles' study later that night, Claw drops a bombshell. He is the anonymous author of Psychic Angles, the very book Greta had been reading. He reveals that the Grove was formerly known as the Park, a site of 3 distinct, unsolved tragedies. A monk strangled in 1858, an antiquarian found dead in 1865, and a young woman who fell from her window in 1903. All were found at the foot of the same trees in the Poplar Grove. Claw's theory is chilling. He doesn't believe in ghosts in the traditional sense, but in sympathetic echoes. He explains that all the deaths occurred in the warm months when windows were open to the whispering poplars. He fears Greta's interest in the occult makes her vulnerable to a sympathetic suicide, a psychological compulsion to repeat the tragedies of the past. It is a morgue, that house, he rumbles, as they prepare a plan to rescue the Hofmans from their own home. The practical world of Shaun Hofman is crumbling. 2 weeks have passed, and despite his skepticism, the servants have resigned in a state of panic. Greta, whose nerves were already frayed by the Mexican border shootout, is now delighted to find her home is the haunted house from Claw's book. But her delight is a symptom of her mediumistic sensitivity, a sensitive plate that Claw fears will absorb the tragic echoes of the past. The skeptic is converted. Hofman admits to Searles that he, too, has heard the voice. On a windless night, amidst the rustling of the poplars, a soft voice called his name from the shadows. Frightened and seeking answers, he recruits J. Shorter Otley, a sallow-faced New York detective who believes only in what a bullet can stop. Otley is suspicious of the whispering, and suspects the hauntings may be a mask for a much more human predator. The trap is set. Searles, Hofman, and Otley take their positions in the darkened house, watching the avenue. The moon casts long, sharp shadows across the gravel. Otley steps onto the balcony, mimicking Hofman's nightly routine. The whispering of the trees fills the air, a sound that Claw previously noted only occurs when the windows are open. Then, the inexplicable. A shrill cry, 2 shots, and a muffled thud on the drive. They find Otley not just wounded, but mutilated. Along with a crushing blow to his skull, he has a strange, cauterized hole above his right wrist, as if burned by an impossible heat. As Searles flees down the Poplar Avenue in stark fear to find a doctor, the mystery of the Grove deepens. The monk, the antiquarian, and the young girl were all found at the foot of these trees. Is the killer a ghost, or a man using the cycle of crime as his greatest weapon? Maurice Claw returns from Paris, not with a ritual, but with a radical psychological experiment. He believes that Otley's last conscious thought, the image of his attacker, is still etched into the ether around his sickbed. While the nurse glares in disapproval, Claw places a silk handkerchief over his head and enters a telepathic slumber. He emerges with a singular, physical clue. Otley wasn't firing at a ghost in the trees, but at the coach house chimney. For 4 nights, Searles and Hofman live as prisoners in their own home, bound by Claw's cryptic telegrams, "Do not go out on the balcony." But the evil whispering returns, a soft, calling voice that defies the silence of the night. Driven by a mix of fear and bravado, Hofman forgets the warning. He steps onto the moonlit balcony, a perfect target in his light pajamas, his nickel-plated pistol gleaming, a beacon for the killer hidden in the shadows. The whisper is revealed to be a mechanical terror. A strange strumming sound cuts through the air, the vibration of a high-tension wire. As Hofman trips on his slippers, the window behind him shatters. A shot rings out from the avenue, followed by a scream from the coachhouse roof. A body rolls down the red tiles, crashing to the gravel below. The monk and the antiquarian of the past were not victims of spirits, but perhaps of the same deadly technique. The mystery is solved not by a medium, but by a marksman. Maurice Claw emerges from the trees, his pistol still smoking. On the ground lies the saturnine face of Corpus Chris, the third member of the Mexican border gang who had shot Hofman weeks prior. He had tracked the family across the Atlantic, using a high-powered crossbow and silk lines to pull his victims from balconies and create the whispering sound that mimicked the house's legend. The cycle of crime was merely a cover for a very human vendetta. In the grey dawn, Maurice Claw reveals how he solved the mystery, by reading the feverish mind of the unconscious Otley. The detective's injury wasn't a wound from a ghost, but a self-inflicted cauterization. Struck by a venomous arrow, Otley had used the barrel of his own revolver to burn the poison out, a desperate act of survival that Claw recovered through his odic negative while the man lay in a delirium. The whisper in the trees was the sound of a silk line attached to a Sioux pattern Indian bow. Corpus Chris, a man of high culture and even higher malice, used curare, the ancient South American arrow poison. He had tracked Hofman across the globe, using the house's haunted reputation as a screen for his sniper's nest in the coach house. Claw, having anticipated the move, had spent 3 nights hidden in the trees, waiting for the deadly canaille to show his face. The scene shifts to London's artistic quarter. Pike Webley, a celebrated portrait painter, has been found dead in his studio. The press is in a frenzy, and Detective Inspector Grimby is at his wit's end. He seeks out Mr. Searles, admitting that the case is too simple. There is absolutely no evidence, no weapon, and no motive to be found. It is a vacuum of clues that only the master of psychic angles can fill. Grimby and Searles head to Warping Old Stairs to recruit Maurice Claw. Grimby admits he is afraid of Isis Claw, who guards her father's time like a lioness. He fears she views him as a nuisance who wastes the genius's energy. As they drive toward the river in a taxi, the stage is set for Claw's Austerlitz, the moment he will prove once and for all that thoughts are things, and that even a silent studio holds the echoes of a killer's intent. Inspector Grimby is haunted by the violence of the crime. Pike Webley, a man with no enemies and no known vices, was strangled with such ferocity that blue wheals were left deep in his flesh. While Grimby sees only amazing strength, Maurice Claw sees a specific pattern. He begins to spray his bald crown with verbena, a ritual to clear his mind of the objectionable odor of his new armadillos and the blue face of the dead. In the quiet, misty studio, Claw ignores the obvious and focuses on a brass ashtray. To Grimby and Searles, it contains only common refuse. But Claw extracts a single cigarette stump with the precision of a jeweler. "In my hands, it is the evidence. In yours, it is the stump," he rumbles. He claims this tiny specimen is the hangman's rope, a physical anchor for the etheric storm he is about to investigate. The beautiful Isis Claw arrives with a red silk cushion, odically sterilized to prevent interference. As the lights are extinguished, the eccentric investigator lies down on the floor where Webley was found. For 2 hours, he exposes his subconscious mind to the etheric waves of the murder. He seeks to capture the last great emotion of the slain or the cold intent of the slayer, turning his brain into a sensitive photographic film. Claw wakes not with a name, but with a sensation. He declares, "Tonight, I do murder with my bare hands." He has inhabited the mind of the assassin, but the result is a paradox. Instead of a cry of horror or a motive of hate, his subconscious has recorded a beautiful sound. The solution to the strangulation of Pike Webley lies not in a woman or a debt, but in a harmony that resonated in the killer's mind at the moment of the deed. Time has passed, and the murder of Pike Webley has faded from the headlines. A bitter rift has formed between Inspector Grimby and Maurice Claw. Grimby, feeling like a fool for trusting in beautiful sounds and odic negatives, dismisses Claw as a charlatan. Yet, Claw remains cryptic, suggesting that Grimby relax himself at a concert. It is a hint the inspector is too angry to take, but one that points toward a symphony of evidence only Claw can hear. Len Hassett, a morbid black-and-white artist, has moved into the ill-fated studio, drawn by its low rent and murderous history. Maurice Claw, sensing the cycle of crime is about to repeat its rhythm, requests an invitation to the housewarming. He arrives not as a detective, but as a guest, accompanied by the radiant Isis. The air in the studio is thick with the scent of wet London fog and the uneasy excitement of those standing on a haunted spot. By the fire sits Serge Skobeloff, a Russian pianist with a face that shifts from benevolent to devilish in the flickering light. He is a man of uncanny power, who refuses to publish his music, claiming no one else can play his soul's emotions. As he prepares to play, he announces a new composition, a prelude designed to express the lust of slaying, an attempt to capture the very atmosphere of the studio's tragic past. Skobeloff plays, and the studio is filled with a grotesque, masterful harmony. It is the sound of an emotion experienced, not just imagined. As the notes die away, a stunned silence grips the room. In that stillness, the hiss of Maurice Claw's verbena spray cuts through the air. That prelude, Claw whispers, it has a bad smell. He has recognized the beautiful sound from his odic slumber, the musical signature of a killer who paints his crimes in chords. Under the direction of Maurice Claw, the party moves from the studio to Serge Skobeloff's hotel suite. The Russian pianist, a man of colossal vanity, is persuaded to play his murderous prelude once more. As the final, harrowing chord in G minor rings out, Claw makes a seemingly absent-minded phone call about a forgotten ermine cloak. It is the signal. Detective Inspector Grimby bursts into the room, and the beautiful sound is replaced by the roar of a wild beast as Skobeloff leaps at the inspector's throat. The strength of the strangler is revealed. Skobeloff nearly squeezes the life out of Grimby before Claw intervenes with a simple operation of leverage. Realizing he is trapped, the pianist's face transforms into a devil face of pure evil. With a peal of frenzied laughter, he springs through the French windows and leaps 60 feet to his death. To the public, he is a suicide. To Claw, he is a canaille who sought supreme emotion through the ultimate crime. Back in Searle's study, Claw explains the odic evidence. The sound he heard in his slumber was a G minor chord that was physically unplayable by any normal human hand. The blue wheels on Pike Webley's neck were spaced so far apart that only a giant, or a pianist with abnormal reach, could have left them. Skobeloff's music wasn't just inspired by the murder. It was a rhythmic translation of the act itself, written in a key only his hands could master. The final link was a single cigarette stump. Claw had identified it in the studio as containing hashish, Indian hemp, a rarity in London. He waited until he saw Skobeloff smoke an identical cigarette in his hotel suite before signaling the arrest. Skobeloff was a mad genius who murdered to paint in chords the sensation of slaying. As Claw sprays his hot brain with verbena, he leaves Grimby with a final, witty jab, "Your brain, my friend, is as cool as a lemon." The mystery begins at the gloomy Georgian residence of Mr. Mark Pettigrew. A burglar has bypassed priceless relics to perform a singular, grisly task, the decapitation of Horanku, a priestess of Sekhet. Pettigrew, himself looking like a relic, holds the severed head, a mess of bitumen-scented linen and shriveled features. There is no theft, no motive, only a cleanly severed neck and a sense of stark amazement. Inspector Grimby summons Maurice Claw to Sotheby's auction rooms. A second mummy has been beheaded. Under the white glare of an electric lamp, the headless corpse lies on a table, surrounded by stony pharaohs and leering gods. Isis Claw, radiant in lettuce green silk, identifies the victim, a contemporary of Pettigrew's priestess. The air is full of deadness, and the crime is no longer an isolated incident, but an epidemic of deadly dead outrages. While Grimby looks for a curse, Maurice Claw looks for a mental negative. He declares the butcher to be possessed, a madman whose brain has charged the ether with grotesque thought forms. Claw eschews his usual odic photography for this case, sensing her obsession so singular that it has bypassed the normal laws of the cycle of crime. He looks not at the body, but into the shadows, searching for the hanging evidence of a lunatic's idea. Suddenly, the investigator is struck by a thought, a disturbing thought that sends him into a frenzy. Grabbing his brown bowler, He drags Isis and Searles from the room, leaving Grimsby and the curator, Mr. Welby, in a state of bewilderment. Claw has linked the two mummies not by their deaths, but by their library, the historical record of the relics themselves. The chase is on, not for a thief, but for the conclusion of a 4,000-year-old drama. Returning to Wapping, the trio finds the Emporium in darkness. The front door is unlocked, a chilling sign of intrusion. Inside, under a counter littered with false teeth and glass eyes, lies William. He isn't merely drunk. He has been professionally silenced. Claw, with the precision of a chemist, identifies the culprit. A massive dose of pure opium slipped into the man's beer. The hunter of mummies is no longer just a vandal. He is a calculated criminal. Searles is led beyond the fusty shop into the secret heart of Claw's home. The transition is jarring, from the squalor of Wapping to a wide landing paneled in black oak, guarded by armored figures and priceless Chinese porcelain. This is the domain of the jealous librarian. In Claw's personal study, a chaotic mix of laboratory, warehouse, and bedroom, the horror repeats. A fourth mummy lies on the floor, its head severed and cast aside like rubbish. Maurice Claw retreats to his daughter's Parisian-style boudoir to consult his unique library. He uncovers a 4,000-year-old clue, the Book of the Lamps, a magical text revealed to the priest Pancor and guarded by his descendants. In the 14th dynasty, the book vanished from its secret altar. Claw realizes that the beheaded mummies are all priests of the same family, the family of Pancor. The butcher isn't looking for a head. He is looking for something hidden inside them. The odic negative was neglected because Claw mistook a mastermind for a madman. The decapitations are a systematic search for a lost manuscript, possibly entombed within the very wrappings or skulls of the Bubastite priests. Claw knows who holds the only other copy of the record, and he knows that the hunter is close. This is no madman's work, he rumbles, but done with a wonderful purpose. The cycle of the 14th dynasty is repeating in the heart of London. The Menses Museum becomes the stage for the final act. Maurice Claw, anticipating the rhythm of the intruder, places Inspector Grimby inside a glass wall case, hidden amongst the very mummies he is sworn to protect. Claw knows that the museum's night watchmen and owlie patrols are no match for a hunter who knows the ins and outs of the archives. They wait in a silence so thick it feels like the 4,000-year-old dust of the tombs. The skylight reveals a small figure moving with practiced ease. He unlocks the case and begins to haul a priest's mummy onto the floor, knife in hand. Grimsby pounces, and the lights flare up to reveal a shocking truth. The captive is Mr. Mark Pettigrew, the very man whose own mummy was the first victim. The circle has closed. The victim was his own predator, performing a burglary upon his own collection to mask his true hunt. Claw explains the motive, the Book of the Lamps. A rare manuscript in Pettigrew's possession claimed that a priceless ritual of ancient magic was hidden within the skull of a priest from the family of Pancor. Pettigrew, an enthusiast driven to madness by the lure of ancient power, had been systematically beheading every known mummy of that dynasty in a desperate search for the hidden papyrus. He didn't want the heads. He wanted the knowledge entombed within them. There will be no prosecution. Claw deems the fever of research a disease rather than a crime. But he leaves Pettigrew with a final, crushing blow. There was a fifth mummy of the Pancor line, one Pettigrew never knew existed. Claw found it years ago in Egypt. I beheaded him. Claw rumbles with a triumphant flourish. As Pettigrew leaps at him in a frenzy of jealousy, Claw calmly sprays the man with verbena. The cycle of the 14th dynasty ends not with a miracle, but with a scent of flowers and a secret kept by the wily fox of Wapping. Grange is a house of deep shadows and Victorian relics. Sir James Leyland, a breezy colonial back from the Australian bush, plays host to an oddly assorted party. Beside him sits Maurice Claw, a heavy figure in a satin-lapelled dress coat that belongs to a different sartorial epoch, and the dazzling Isis, whose amber gown and Parisian daring contrast sharply with the suits of armor hanging from the distant, paneled walls. The soft light of red-shaded candles barely disperses the gloom, making every appearance of the silent butler feel like a spectral visitation. The traditional ghost of Grange was a predictable grey monk who walked from the chapel to a walled-up secret door. But Claw, author of Psychic Angles, posits a new theory: ghosts, like nature's models, are duplicated but never altered. If the ghost is learning new tricks, it is not the old monk, but a new intelligence. This new goblin has abandoned the chapel for the billiard room and, most disturbingly, has taken to sleeping in the baronet's own bed. As coffee and liqueurs are served, the air becomes loaded with psychic impressions. Maurice Claw urges the company to smoke and concentrate, turning the dining table into a laboratory of the occult. Sir James recounts his arrival from the bush, finding the house in apple pie order thanks to his cousin Clement, until the very first night, when the silence of the room was shattered by something that no housekeeper could ever explain. The narrative is cut short not by words, but by a sound that chills the blood. A peal of demoniacal laughter rolls through the apartment, booming, hollow, and mad. It is a hell sound that seems to emanate from the very walls and floor, surrounding the diners in a cacophony of devilish mirth. As the laughter ceases as abruptly as it began, the lighted oasis feels smaller and more vulnerable than ever. The Grange ghost has made its presence known. Following the demoniacal laughter, Maurice Claw prepares his mental negative. Sir James recounts a house rendered uninhabitable, phantom footsteps, cold winds in the billiard room, and a low, filthy mumbling that wakes him with obscene suggestions. Claw, unfazed, prepares to sleep in the very vortex of the disturbance, the settee by the gun room. Armed with his odically sterilized red cushions, he prepares to open his inner eye to the thought forms of murders long forgotten. As the house settles into an uneasy stillness, the eccentric investigator stretches his ungainly limbs upon the settee. He waits for the one who laughs, confident that the thoughts of slayers and the despair of the slain will come to him in his slumber. Sir James and Searles retire, leaving the wily fox in the dark heart of Grange. Meanwhile, the baronet reveals his plan to abandon the haunted manor for the even older friar's house, currently being restored by his diligent cousin, Clement. Searles, unable to sleep, watches the moonlit orchard from his panelled room. In the distance, the grey tower of Friar's house looms like a giant monk against the trees. The air of Grange feels heavy with ghostly evil, a cloud from which the devilish laughter might break at any moment. The silence of the night is absolute, a fragile peace that masks the psychological storm Claw is navigating in the rooms below. The stillness is shattered by a piercing scream that racks the nerves and halts the heart. It is the voice of Isis Claw, breaking the silence with a cry of pure terror. "Father! Oh God! Save him! Save him!" The psychic storm has broken, and the inner eye of Maurice Claw may have looked upon something more dangerous than a thought form. The haunting of Grange has turned into a desperate struggle for survival. The scream of Isis Claw brings Searles and Sir James racing into the moonlit hall. They find Maurice Claw sitting up on his sterilized cushions, adjusting his pince-nez with a chillingly calm hand. Clement Leyland appears, ghastly pale in a red dressing gown, as Claw announces his defeat. He declares Grange unclean and warns the baronet to fly to the archaic safety of Friar's house. It is a strategic retreat, a science of the mind gambit designed to empty the house. The morning is a parade of haggard faces. Claw dominates the breakfast table with eccentric tales of Saharan scorpions, masking his true intent. The party moves to Friar's house, a crypt-like tower dating back to King John. Claw, complaining that the place smells abominably of dead abbots, squirts verbena into the air and suddenly remembers his forgotten notes. Leaving the others at the ancient gate, he returns to Grange with Searles, and a gleam of triumph in his eyes. Back at Grange, Claw bypasses the odic negatives for something more tangible. He leads Searles into the deep, old-fashioned fireplace of the billiard room. Disappearing up the chimney, he reveals a hidden recess and a steep, narrow wooden stair built into the thickness of the walls. It is a Jacobite hiding place, a secret artery running between the banqueting hall and the gun room, the very path from which the laughter and the danger emanate. At the top of the stair, in a box-like room, Claw finds his evidence, a square wooden case. He conceals it beneath his caped coat, his strange eyes flashing behind his pince-nez. The haunting of Grange succumbs to the science of the mind, he declares. The ghost is no longer a phantom of the Regency, but a captured piece of technology. The hunter has found the mechanism of the laughter, but he has yet to unmask the hand that turned the key. The scene shifts to the dungeonesque friar's house. Sir James and Clement Leyland sit in a brooding silence, while Maurice Claw regales them with tales of the Borgias, stories of poisons and family betrayals that turn the stomach. Claw has spent a week watching, waiting, and playing the fox. He has realized that the haunting of Grange was merely a tactic to drive Sir James into this ancient, crypt-smelling tower, a place where a fatal accident would be much easier to arrange. Suddenly, the silence of the refectory is shattered. The demoniacal laughter of Grange, the same wicked, hollow peal, erupts within the walls of Friar's house. Sir James is turned to stone. Searles is gripped by terror. But the reaction of Clement Leyland is the most telling. His teeth chatter, and his eyes start from his sockets. It is then that Claw speaks, his voice a hammer blow. "It is for you to take it away, Mr. Leyland." Claw reveals the Jacobite hiding place at Grange was only the beginning. He stamps upon the floor, and a section of the solid stone wall pivots to reveal a black cavity. "Descend," Claw commands. The one who laughs is upon the 7th step. As Clement Leyland flees the room, Claw descends and returns with a modern gramophone, a clockwork device hidden by Clement to simulate the haunting. The ghost was a machine, and the haunting was a psychological campaign to move the victim to his execution site. The final revelation is the most chilling of all. Claw had explored the death-smelling place and found its ancient machinery freshly oiled. Clement had intended for Sir James to discover this secret passage and lead the way. "Why did you emphasize the 7th step?" Sir James asks. Claw's reply is a cold epitaph for the cousin's plan. "Because there is no 7th step, only the mouth of a well." The cycle of greed was broken by a man who knew that evil thoughts are things that can be captured, and then turned against the thinker. In a room thick with intellectual tension, for men and a woman gather around the prominent archaeologist Otto Brearley. The air is heavy with the scent of old paper and Claw's verbena. Brearley has made a discovery that lifts the veil of Isis, a unique papyrus from the priest Carmus, detailing the forbidden inner mysteries of initiation. Claw, ever the old curious, warns that Brearley is playing with burning fires, his rumbling voice echoing the gravity of the ancient warning. Carmus, an arch-adept of the early Egyptian times, left behind a detailed account of his consecration, a crime punishable by death in both this world and the next. Brearley, obsessed with the labyrinth of Isis worship, has spent 6 months deciphering the script. Carmus claims that at the climax of the ritual, the goddess herself appeared. Brearley's goal is not just study, but reenactment, to prove if the goddess is an entity or a mere hallucination. To test the papyrus, Brearley has constructed a perfect duplicate of the initiation chamber. Every material, from the specific stone to the ritual incense, has been painstakingly sourced. Dr. Fairbank, concerned by Brearley's drawn face and feverish brightness, fears for the archaeologist's sanity. But the science of cycles dictates that the ritual must occur on a specific night. The first night of Panoi, the 10th month of the Sarthic year. That night is tonight. The date is the 1st of April, a Julian coincidence that adds a layer of irony to the proceedings. With the servants away and the house empty, Brearley prepares to chant the lost prayers of the Nile. Claw, who also speaks the ancient tongue, remains gloomy, his massive head wagging in silent protest. "It is tonight," he rumbles. The company rises to follow Brearley upstairs, stepping away from the natural world and toward an experiment that may shatter their understanding of reality. In the dense shadows of the corridor, Ailsa Brearley confronts the investigators. Her oval face, touched by a stray beam of light, betrays a pathetic droop of anxiety. She fears for her brother's sanity, but more so, she fears the nature of the ceremony itself. Is it idolatry? Maurice Claw, paternal and grave, warns that thought things can kill. He views Brearley not as a scientist, but as a man who has built an intellectual lighthouse that may attract a storm he cannot weather. Inside the study, the walls have literally closed in. Brearley has walled off a section of the room to create the secret place described by the priest Carmus. A small, black wooden door breaks the expanse of books, leading to a chamber no one but the initiate may enter. Brearley, gaunt and ascetic in a loose white linen garment, has prepared himself through months of fasting. He believes that to look upon the goddess is death for the unchosen, and he is ready to risk that finality. The ritual requires the hymn of dedication, to be sung by a virgin beyond the door. Elsa takes up a slender, ancient Egyptian harp on a claw-shaped pedestal, a relic from the tomb of a priestess. Though she knows not the meaning of the Egyptian words she must chant, she feels the creepy resonance of the instrument. The silence of the empty house becomes oppressive, a void waiting to be filled by the lost language of the Nile. Maurice Claw issues one last warning. An evil thought thing hovers about them. He fears Brearley is about to give form to a being that should remain in the dark continents of the past. Brearley, consumed by the fire of research, ignores him. The lights are extinguished, and the company is plunged into darkness. Claw, the old silent, settles in to wait. The experiment, the final, desperate attempt to bridge the gap between archaeology and the occult, has begun. The ritual begins in total darkness. As Elsa Brearley chants the monotonous, three-note strain of the hymn of dedication, the air in the room changes. Searles feels his nerve force being drained by the ancient tongue. Elsa, deathly pale, eventually retreats to her room, leaving the men to a long, muffled vigil. Then, a new sound shatters the silence, a shivering, bell-like rattle, the sistrum of the Isis temples, echoing from within the house. The door opens to a flood of soft, moon-like radiance. Elsa returns, but she is transformed. Her hair is unbound, a gleaming torrent. Her face is hidden by a diaphanous veil. She is unnaturally, magnificently beautiful. Maurice Claw, recognizing the peril of the mental negative, screams a desperate warning, "Look away. Do not look at her." But Dr. Fairbank, fueled by love and concern, leaps forward into the gaze of the entity. With a gaze that fells Fairbank like a physical blow, the luminous figure enters the inner sanctum. The room is filled with a pungent, stifling perfume. Claw and Searles drag the unconscious doctor away, locked in a room until something goes back where it came from. When the trance breaks, the house returns to silence. They find Elsa in her bed, her hair strewn over the pillow, waking from what she believes was a faint sleep, unaware of the goddess she had become. Fairbank survives, but he bears a square bruise between his brows, a mark of the mighty blow from the unseen. The investigation ends with a final mystery. The Karmas papyrus and Brearley's translation have vanished. In their place are the ashes in Elsa's room. The goddess Isis, or the thought thing created by Brearley's obsession, has reclaimed her secrets. The science of cycles is closed, and the veil remains unlifted. Maurice Claw stands amidst the ruins of the experiment, his scent spray working with vigor. He reveals that Brearley did not summon a spirit, but clothed a thought in the form of his sister. Using the ancient ritual and the scent of Kai-Fi incense, Brearley tapped into a collective consciousness, a thought thing built by generations of moon worshippers. The ritual acted as a bridge, allowing this massive, centuries-old energy to temporarily displace Elsa's own mind. Claw explains that the moonlight and the sounds were psychological projections, so powerful they became objective reality for those in the room. This suggestion is the core of Claw's occult philosophy. The mind is the ultimate creator and destroyer. Dr. Fairbank was not struck by a hand, but by a psychic force so immense that it left a physical mark, a mental bruise reflected on his skin, a testament to how close he came to total mental annihilation. The only thing that saved Fairbank from death was a force Claw deems as great as ancient thought, Elsa's love. It acted as a shield, weakening the blow of the goddess entity. In a startling moment of candor, Claw reveals the truth of the young couple's hearts, turning a moment of horror into one of human connection. The supernatural world may be made of thoughts, but Claw reminds us that the most powerful thoughts are often the most personal. In the final chilling revelation, Claw traces the shape of the bruise on Fairbank's forehead. It is not a random mark of a fall. As Claw's finger moves through the air, he outlines the ancient sign of Isis, the knot or the tayet. The goddess left her seal upon the man who dared to look her in the face. The papyrus is burned, the secrets are lost, and only the mark remains, a silent warning that some cycles are better left unrepeated.